Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks to the organizers for inviting me to do this. I did not feel qualified to, do a webinar, but here I am, right? Dwight was very supportive in that. Um, I'm gonna start off like telling you a little bit about me. I also apologize for any typos in the slides. I was just like, this looks cute and I kept it moving, right? If anything is happening. But here we are, right? This is me, right? My favorite recent photo with my new blondish hair, right? I'm Dr. Noelle Sawyer. I'm Black, I'm Bahamian, I'm a woman, I'm all of those things before I'm a mathematician, right? Because I could stop being a mathematician at any point in time, but this other stuff is sort of, I'm pretty sure stuck with me for now, right? Also a baker, I'm a reader, I do have hobbies, even when it doesn't feel like I have time to do them, right? So this is me and a bowl of, I don't know what I was making, maybe a cake for posterity, right? This is also my family. I like to bring them up in talks because I don't even know if I'm mentioning family specifically in this talk, but people who either have a very supportive family or a very unsupportive family know how much of a difference this can make, right? So this is a recent visit because I hadn't seen them for 10 months because of COVID, right? So here is everybody, here are the babies. You will hear me talk about them at any point in time. Clearly they're actually toddlers, but babies forever. I'm also missing a sister, just to be clear, when she sees this recording, but all of us haven't been able to be all together for like a little while, right? So I think I challenge norms sometimes, right? Like this is me, I got quoted in a Scientific American article along with some other people, right? About modern mathematics confronting its white patriarchal past, which these are hefty words, but I mean, you know how it is, right? Like white men are making all the rules and the rest of us are just here like trying to find space often, right? So I see that Maria has put my thesis in the chat, unpublished because I haven't gotten there yet, but you can see all the written details. Um, I also, I can't take credit for the AMS blogs being shut down. However, I have recently told the AMS on their own blog that I'm very unhappy with the way they handled some things. Uh, and within 6 months, the blogs are gone. I think they were getting a little tired of us. I don't know if any of y'all are here. But yeah, I challenge norms sometimes. Sometimes you've got to ask, like, are you challenging norms by existing? There's different ways to do this. I don't have the link to this up. I was just providing evidence that maybe I'm qualified to give this talk. Um, but here's what we're doing today, right? Like we're talking about norms in the math community, whatever that means. Of course, I won't have covered everything, right? Stop me at any point in time if you have questions. And I know we've got like at least half an hour at the end to just chat, which I'm looking forward to. We're going to talk about finding norms, recognizing norms, and breaking them. That's important. I do think the way people talk about norms a lot are like knowing them so you can follow them. I like to talk about where norms are because usually they're bad. And you have to know what they are to understand the situation you're in to just start like breaking things down, right? Like we've seen in life, you can't just wait for old people to die for things to change, right? So you've got to be able to find norms in order to break them. Okay, I have an immediate activity for everyone. If you have your phone, a pen and pencil, this is gonna, anything that you have, or just like really think about this list, right? Write a list of the people you have that you trust. And like this is, I am focusing this mainly in terms of like your academic life, right? Like who in your department, right? Like fellow majors, like are there professors you actually trust? Are there professors outside of your department that you trust? Maybe a postdoc? Do you have mentors outside of your department, like on campus or not? Is there some staff on campus that you trust? This one is, I feel like less likely. Is there administration you trust on campus, right? Like I want everyone to just take a moment and like make a list, right? Like notice where you're missing people, right? Notice where you're full, right? So think about where your cups are full and where they're empty. I'm gonna be quiet and just let people write for I think a couple of, another half a minute. Oh, not to call him out. I just noticed there's another Bahamian on the call. So hey there. This never happens to me. He's not a mathematician, but I think he showed up to be supportive. Very excited. Okay. I still see a little bit of writing, so I'm gonna wait just a bit. I just got done teaching, which is why I'm still using my strong teaching voice. Okay, you have this list. I'm not asking you to share it. I just want you to have it because as we go along, like I might reference, like here are good people to ask about these things. Someone that's not on this list, that's not necessarily on your campus at all, right? I mean, I do want to ask, you don't share this number, but just observe how many people you wrote down, right? Is it a lot? Is it a few? Do you have a lot of gaps, right? Wherever there are gaps, I'm going to talk a little bit about filling those in, even though that's not the main point of my talk. And there's one more name I want you to write down or starring someone on your list in particular. I like to call them an is this wild friend, right? When you're having a thought and you're like very worried, was this a racism, right? Like, did someone mistreat me or am I overreacting? Most of the time, like you're right, you just need someone to call and talk to or text and describe the situation to. And if you are being too wild, you can trust them to tell you, or you can trust them to super back you up. A particular instance, like I had on multiple workshops, right? Like some white man has been extremely rude to me, but I was like, no, Noelle, it's just your imposter syndrome. So I call up my is this wild friend who happens to be a mathematician, but at certain points in my life has not been one, right? And I'm like, hey, this happened, right? I'm just overreacting, right? And they're like, no, that was rude, right? Because when we start talking later about like breaking norms, right? Sometimes you need to have someone that's like your check-in person or multiple of them. They don't have to be on campus. They just have to be someone you can talk to. You need one of these people. If you don't have one, right? This is, I think, a larger gap than missing like 3 of the categories on the page before. They can be math people. They can be people in your field. They can be people like old friends, right? Like keep all of these people in mind. Okay. So just continuing the context, I can't cover every department and every situation. A lot of you are not undergrads, right? I mean, this is an undergrad focused webinar, but it's not, I think the advice is pretty broad, right? But you need to keep in mind while we're talking about this, like be aware of where you're at. Are you somewhere big, medium, small? I have much more experience in smaller departments, which means I have a lot of experience with like tight knit, sometimes to their detriment communities, right? You need to ask more questions. How white is your department, right? How straight is your department? Is it like, like, is it 17 to straight white men, right? And then one Asian dude and one Black man, right? Like, what's the layout of your department? I am putting this here not because I'm going to reference it, but because like in every consideration we make thinking about norms, these can look very different in different contexts, as I've noticed, right? Even just to say like, like in larger departments, I find people tend to keep their doors closed more often, right? Like, because they don't want everyone dropping in on them every second of every day, right? Whereas like in smaller departments, often doors are open all the time. Like I feel weird that my door is closed at work right now because there are only 8 of us, right? So, okay, we're actually gonna start, right? Let's get started, right? Like I can't account for absolutely everything, so all of that context, but I will be mentioning how context affects your response. Okay, like that's my big thing. I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Yes, we are socialized to gaslight and contradict our own feelings if we're not like status quo people. So you need a friend to back you up, okay? There are 3 assumptions that I'm carrying through this whole thing, right? And if you are in disagreement with them, right, like maybe this won't go super well. Like one thing I want to start right off the bat, like this is not a talk about like making your department love you or your institution love you or your fields love you, right? Like institutions and departments can't love you. They can only value your labor, right? So in your goal of norm breaking, it cannot be to be loved. Like it can't, if that's your goal, it's going to fail, right? People can love you and people can value you, right? So you should be doing things for people. You can be doing things for a group of people, but yeah, it just, your institution can't love you. So I'm not even working under that assumption. Third assumption, suspicion is not unreasonable. I know we have, again, been socialized to think that when you're, this is coming back to the, is that wild friend, right? Again, if you are not the like traditional person wherever you are and you are thinking you're overly suspicious, you're probably not. There's probably a ton of evidence. So I am suspicious probably by nature, but also have been trained to be more suspicious after if I'm counting undergrad, this is my 12th year in math, right? So these are the assumptions I'm working on, okay? These are my three main ones. They're not extremely positive, but they are important. And I'm gonna tell you how the rest of this is gonna go. I have a list of norms I just sort of wanna talk about. I wanna talk about like why they're trash, and then I'm gonna talk about like ways or reasons to break them or why you might not want to, because I know I used to say this a lot when I was looking at both grad schools and jobs. Like, I don't know that I want to, that I have the strength to be the person to desegregate my department. You know, like sometimes like that's not your ministry, right? Like sometimes the big move is not your ministry, but you should be thinking about things and not just hiding because you think hiding's the right thing to do, right? So like think about why you're making decisions and then hold on to that, okay? So first of all, what is a norm? I asked our good friend Google. Right? Something that's usual, typical, or standard, right? So I loved this because the quote that came with it is, this system has been the norm in Germany for decades, which is sort of like how I feel like departments and mathematicians talk about stuff. They're like, but you know, when we were doing math in 1925, this is just how we wrote things down, right? Like norms in writing in particular and the way we teach things. Like try asking someone about quals and why we have them. And they're just like, we just do, right? Like this is exactly what norms are. And if you ever want to know like how to spot one, I have a delightful screenshot from Cinderella 2, right? If you question something and the answer you get in return is it simply isn't done, right? Like if anyone has seen this, there's a lot of dancing around this. Like it simply isn't done. You found yourself a norm. You got one. Like you found one. It's there. That's the only evidence you need when you ask why we do something. And there is the flimsiest answer of all time. That is a norm. Okay. Some things are not like questions you ask, and I hesitate to use this phrasing and to call them norms because I don't want to diminish it, but like racism is a norm, right? Like transphobia is a norm, right? Like all these are norms because they're like very acceptable behavior among the higher ups, right? So it's, people are often racist because it's okay to be racist, right? Where there are like their friends are racist, their bosses are racist, and I could replace this with sexist or homophobic or transphobic or Islamophobic, right? Like these are norms that I think I'm touching on, like not each one individually, but I will be talking about like how identities play into things. Sorry, I'm noticing why are so many math papers unreadable in the chat? Because it's a norm. It's simply making papers readable and understandable simply isn't done, right? We've got people breaking norms in that. I think maybe if anybody knows JP, right? Like I think his papers are extremely readable, right? Anyway, more on that later, just name dropping all over the place. A caveat before we begin, I saw this tweet last week that like really hyped me up to write this. Norms are applied to identities differently, right? Like there's more than one set of rules. So often you may encounter pushback when you're like, hey, why do we do this thing? And like, I don't know, it's the same thing like if you're 7 feet tall and you're like, why are the doors short? And all of your like 5'8" friends are like, what are you talking about? A door has never been short for me, right? Like you get a lot of, it's not that easy, but like, you know, when you try to mention microaggressions to people who have not been microaggressed, I don't know if that's a word, they're like, I don't think that really happened. That might not be how they say it. But one of the things, Joe Rogan, who I found out literally last week is Fear Factor Dude, just to be clear, I found this out last week. This is a tweet by someone like pointing out like learning like respectability is a scam because it's only applied to people of like, is lower the right word? I was going to say lower socioeconomic status, right? Like you got to be white. You can't be white to encounter respectability norms, right? You can't be white and rich. Like you just may not have seen them, right? We're supposed to bend to access any institution. Like this person's talking about like media, right? But this applies to math very specifically, right? Restricting your own freedom does not guarantee you access to whatever like these other people are getting because they're not bucking up against these norms because they don't apply to them. I know I have not said any norms yet, but I kept adding more slides that were like a caveat, a note, because all of these are so important, I think. But let's start, right? Norm number one, the math community is all that matters. Right? I see some faces. I think I'm starting kind of strong. Some of them we're gonna lighten up in the end, get a little spicier near the end. But first norm, when you find a community, it has to be in line with your number one identity, which is math. Right? Like, I don't know if y'all have felt this push from departments and things where it's sort of like, you are math, right? Like that's what you have to do. You have to eat, drink, sleep, sweat, math. I think I put in a word that's not supposed to be there, but like math is life, right? Like that's your norm number one. When you're making friends, they should be networking connections. You don't have hobbies, you do math. If you have a hobby, it is a math hobby. Or I don't have experience with other fields, but I'm assuming this is not specific to math, right? So why this is trash, right? A lot of us are many other things first and mathematicians fourth, right? Like I didn't even put it second because if you're carrying a bunch of identities around, right? Like where are you putting mathematician? Right? Like, what did I say? I'm a Black Bahamian woman, right? That's three things immediately. I'd probably put baker before math because I would more willingly give up my math career than I would give up making carrot cakes. And I really, like, I mean that. If someone made me pick, I'd pick cakes. So this is like, it's a trash norm because people don't work like this. Like we don't, like we need friends. We need people who do things differently from us. One of the things I've been trying to do since I moved to Austin is like desperately locate friends that aren't professors, right? Because you need people to hit all of the points of your identity that you can, right? So this norm, totally trash. The thing that's really important when you're thinking about community, and I don't want to sound like like I'm trying to become a therapist to escape math, but like the important questions when you're finding community are like, what are your goals, right? We're like, why are you here? Why are you doing math? What are your values? What do you need to survive? Oh, Frida's here in the chat, right? Frida is this wild friend who I call at multiple workshops to say, is this white man treating me poorly or am I making this up? So sorry to call you out like that. And like the third thing is like, what do you need to survive? I actually think that is the most important before anything. Because if you don't have what you need to survive, whatever that means to you, like money, or like just you need someone who will play a game with you sometimes, right? Or like you really need a gym friend because like if you don't have someone to go to the gym with, like your mental health really suffers, right? When you're forming community, these are your three, I think what people would naturally gravitate toward without capitalism, right? Like, what do I want from life? What do I think is important? Like, if you value, you know, not cutting down trees, perhaps you won't be friends with a lumberjack, right? Like, these are naturally occurring things. So like these are the questions I think you should form your community around, right? Not just who is the best to know to advance your math career. Like I'm not saying it's wrong to network. You should be doing some networking, but how can you do that when you're not filling up these other parts of yourself, right? So goals, values, survival, like the question here is maybe looking at the list, which is mostly departmental based or institution based, like think about what other things you want there. Like, do you want this is COVID, right? So I can't be like, go to dance class, right? Like we're missing a lot of this now. It's a problem. But like, how can you meet people that support you? How can you find people that help you or you help each other take care of your mental health, right? Like, and help to, I can't see all of my slide right here. How can you take care of you? Um, I was mentioning before we started, like I've made a lot of friends on the internet. Also, they've been getting like much better and much stronger just because of COVID, right? Like I can't go out and meet people. So I'm making real good friends with Twitter strangers who are no longer strangers, right? I have people that I kind of like that I send cards to because I like getting it, sending cards and receiving cards, right? Like, and it gives me so much. I'm not a doctor. I'm going to say serotonin though, when I get one. So like, how are you meeting people? Other students, staff on campus? There's like this weird elitism on academia, like you can't be friends with the admin assistant or something, but like you can be. Me and Frida know we're writing Valentine's Day cards to her right now, right? Like to our admin assistant from grad school because we love her. Are you going to coffee shops? Actually talk to your baristas. They're also people with hopes and goals and dreams, right? Like, please talk to them. Meet people on Twitter. I'm slightly, like, I'm just a little too old to like actually reference what's happening on TikTok. So this is a question and someone might have to tell me in the chat. I don't know if you can like meet people on TikTok, but if you can, no, okay, I see like a shake head, like Noelle, you're so embarrassing. Oh my God. Okay. But like there are ways to meet people and you have to do what works for you. If you're like introverted, I actually think Twitter is pretty good because like people DM me and they're like, hey, I saw your picture and that looked cute. You do math? And I'm like, yeah, I do math. Where are you? What's going on? Right. And that's how I have made a lot of friends. I think someone else gave a talk about finding community, so I'm not going to stick on here for super long. But breaking that norm, right? Like the thing is, you're allowed to be both a person and a mathematician. And I need you to carry that with you. Like being a mathematician is not a personality trait, even though we like to pretend that it is. It is a job. It can be a hobby, but it's not a personality. Like your main thing, if the only thing you have holding you together is that you're a mathematician, it would be nice to be able to find some other things, right? Like, I'm not saying that feeling like it's a large part of your personality is wrong. That's not true. It's just like you are allowed to do other things. Norm number 2, so we're toning it down, asking for flexibility, a little more like practical advice, right? This is like a tiny norm that we can extend to lots of parts of our life. I'm seeing a lot of people being like, sorry, about the old norm, about the norm I just had up. Everyone basically told us we have to do math every second of every day, and it made me feel bad for a really long time. The specific norm I'm putting here is if I ask for an extension on an assignment, I am less than perfect. Right. And this goes, carries through with us through our careers, right? Like if you're a faculty and you're on a committee and like you're not getting stuff done in time and you're feeling like a failure, or like you're not handing your students their assignments back on time, or like you are sick and you think you have to go to work or class or your research meeting, right? Like all of these are flexibility. I'm focusing in on extensions because I think that's actually one thing I want to talk about. Why is this norm trash? And this applies to any other flexibility I was talking about. Your white male counterparts are asking for extensions all the time. It doesn't matter if they're in the syllabus. It doesn't matter if the syllabus says no extensions. They're asking and they're probably getting them. Right? They feel comfortable asking because this is only a norm applied to some people. Right? Like it's a norm applied to you if like your parents didn't go to college, right? Because you don't know about stuff like this, right? Like, or if they did go to college, but like they were also shut out of knowing what the norms were, right? Or like you're not friends with someone who can tell you like how to read the syllabus properly and stuff like that. And this follows through like to grad school, to being a postdoc, to being faculty, right? Like if you don't have someone supporting you ahead of time to let you know what everyone else is doing, you're thinking that like some other things in life, there's no flexibility allowed. However, people are always asking. Usually my go ahead is like ask, I'm gonna put in something here. Are you worried, like you think your professor is like a monster or your boss or your supervisor, whatever, ask your friends in the major or like your friends in the department, is this person I want to ask for flexibility from unreasonable? Right? Like that's really, it's not, are they nice? It's, are they reasonable or unreasonable? right? If your professor is someone that makes you like perform trauma porn for them, right? Like you have to tell them that you broke your leg and exactly how long you were in the ER for, and like a picture of you and your doctor, right, together to get an extension. Maybe don't ask that person because they're unreasonable, right? Um, like your best case scenario is usually an extension. Your usual reasonable-ish worst case is they just say no and you don't get one, right? Like you're not worse off. Your caveat, unreasonable professor, worst case, no, and I resent you for asking, right? I think that's where people are usually worried. This is where this thing comes in, right? If you have a friend in the major, right, you can ask them, what do y'all know about Dr. So-and-so, right? This one is like much lighter than the one from before, but I think this is important to think about. If you're worried about consequences, asking a question like this helps to let you know like what kinds of consequences could present themselves. This last unreasonable thing, this won't show up if your professor is not unreasonable. So break that norm, send that email most of the time, right? Ask that person most of the time. I put send that email because if you ask me things in person, I've forgotten immediately. But however you communicate with your TA or your professor, or again, your supervisor, whatever, like just ask. Everyone else is asking. You deserve to ask. You're there just like everyone else. Haha. Norm number 3, being loud and wrong in class and or meetings. Right, like only smart people are allowed to talk in class. I don't feel confident, so I can't say anything. Okay, whoever, I was trying to pick like a very classic tall white man name, but like, whoever it is who's loud all the time in class and usually probably a little wrong and you're not picking up on it because you're so stressed about how you can't be loud and wrong in class, right? Like they're talking all the time. They're loud all the time. They bounce back. The goal here is not for you to be confident being loud and wrong. The goal is to understand that it's your right. Like someone is here to teach you, or like, again, this extends further in your career, right? Like you're in a research meeting, you're allowed to be wrong in your research meeting, right? You're allowed to be wrong in front of your advisor. You're allowed to be wrong in a faculty. You're allowed to be wrong in a faculty meeting. I mean, I do that less, right? But like other people are wrong so often. And the key part is not their confidence. The key part is that they know that they're allowed to do this. Okay. So this is a trash norm because like you just feel like you're not allowed. There's like, right, like, are you not confident? Right. I'm sliding some more memes in here, right? Are you not confident, or are people actually actively trying to invalidate you? Right. So sometimes it's not that like the norm is actually doesn't exist and you're making it up. What's probably happening is different treatment, right? Like people assume that, making sure there's no like Ted's or any, I'm gonna go with, people assume Ted is like talking with good intentions and thinks he's right. And then people think that are acting like you knew you didn't know that, you shouldn't have said anything. Their reaction, again, unless their reaction is to aggressively try to fail you or kick you out of the research meeting, their reaction is not what's important. The reaction is that you are there to learn something or participate or help, right? So this is the Oprah. I don't know if anyone saw the interview with Meghan and Harry, and like someone was like, I was silent, and she did her little, were you silent or were you silenced? Right. And I keep that in mind because that's often, I'm looking back on situations where like I regretted being quiet and I realized that like there was so much pressure on me to just be quiet and sit in the corner as though like I'm technically not allowed to attend university or something. So there's complicating factors, right? Like I've been mentioning, right? Like racism, sexism, homophobia, right? Like that's at play here, right? If anyone's applying any of these things to you, of course, right? Like that's a pressure for you to be quiet. Is your department or your meeting just a big old boys club and you feel like you've been given a ticket to attend for that one day, right? Do you feel like you're really on the outside, whether or not like you have anything to do with you feeling that way? Is that happening? Someone pointing out, oh yeah, someone's pointing out in the chat that like people who are loud and wrong are often actually trying to catch the professor out, right? Like I'm smarter than you, professor. What changed my life is recognizing that most of these people are actually like annoying as hell. Right? Like that was the thing where I like recognize that some of these people aren't as well liked as it may appear when you feel like you're on the outside looking in. And that has gotten me through many a class with many terrible people. They're not always men, but you know, right? So complicating factors, break that norm, ask yourself what you need to learn, right? Not what you need to learn, it's what you need to be able to learn, right? Is it speaking up more, right? If the answer to that is yes, right, then the thing that you need to do is find a way to speak up more, right? I realize that that is a wild thing to say to someone from someone who is like, I'm risk averse, right? I don't like being loud and wrong as I guess I'm like a big grown mathematician now, right? Like I still am, usually all of the choices for this are sort of uncomfortable. Like staying quiet is uncomfortable and talking is uncomfortable. This is sort of like my set of tasks that I did. Like I try writing a question down before class or before the meeting. So if there's silence and I feel like there's my chance, right? Like I have something ready, like, oh, you know, I was wondering about this thing from before, or something you can ask like before class, before other people get there, or like the same question you could take to office hours, or right, like walking down the hallway to my colleague after the meeting because I didn't want to ask it in the meeting. Try, if you can, to have a class friend that backs you up, right? So you could be like, here's my question. And just like an SNL setup, right? They're like, oh yeah, I was thinking about that too. And now there's two of you, right? Like really strongly asking some questions. And also make it so that the problem is people's mistreatment and definitely not you, right? If you're quiet, it's possible it seems to everyone on the outside the problem is you. If you're asking things and being mistreated, it's clear now that the problem is someone else, right? And that removes a lot of the burden from me, like mentally. Because sometimes I'm like, it's just my fault, I won't talk. But like once I talk and recognize like the differences in how other people are reacting to me, it's helpful for me to feel like, oh, this wasn't wild thoughts I was happening. This is a real occurrence. And also class friend can help you out with this because you could be like, did you see which one when she looked at me? And they're like, yeah. And then you could, right, it's helpful. So this is my norm number 3. I mixed some metaphors here, right? Y'all know I'm not Black, I'm OJ, right? Because OJ Simpson is, I'm so famous, I can't be Black. I don't know if he still says that. I don't pay attention to him. But you know, I'm not Black, I'm a mathematician, right? That's my norm number 4. I'm saying this because I'm Black, so this is what applies to me. And the norm, as you see, if you're an Encanto fan, right? We don't talk about our identities like Bruno, no, right? We don't talk about them. They're not important. This is almost a repeat of the first norm, but I think the vibe is a little bit different here. You know how when you walk in and you're just expected not to put being a mathematician just first, but to shed everything else about yourself, right? Because you are a college student or an academic or a postdoc, like you're expected to leave everything else behind and just be a mathematician, right? Like where people, you can't drop your identities like a backpack outside the department, right? Like these are real things, right? And what people don't understand is you're actively carrying them no matter what they say, okay? Also, this is basically like we don't see color, a control tactic, right? Like, you know, like you can't be getting mistreated because we're all mathematicians here. That's not how that works. Like we know that's not how that works, right? Like we are aware. Your department, your institution doesn't have to pretend to support you if you don't bring your full self to the table. Now, I'm not blaming you for not bringing your full self. There's so much pressure to not do it, right? If you are only a mathematician, then they don't have to do this other, like this stuff they're thinking about as extra. Hate to mention them, but like, this is sort of like the AMR tactic, right? Like, we're just mathematicians, so we just need an organization focused on research and we're not being distracted by inclusion, right? Like, it's a control tactic. Like this is straight out of like a comic book villainry, right? How do you talk about yourself? Right? Like how do you bring yourself to the table? This is where like that list from the beginning of people to talk to comes in. Like, do you have someone in the department to brainstorm with, right? Like I meant to put more questions here, but I forgot about this slide. Whoops. But like, is there a math club or is there a way to start one? This is where I think size of your department really comes in handy. Are you in a department that has a ton of clubs and you could start like an origami club, but it's like secretly brown people of the math department club, right? Like, could you start a new math club? Could you become math club president and then it's just whatever you want it to be? Like, is it something that no one wants? And then you like have a space. Is there an AWM chapter? Is there a professor looking to support people, but they're not experienced mentoring and they're just looking for someone to guide, right? Like pop in on those people and see what you can do. This is a little active, right? So I hesitate on this. Like, this is not for everyone. Like, so there's like, or is it better for you? This is like a mental health question for me more so. Like, if that strong push into the department is not where you have the energy to do things, like, is it better? Like, do you feel like you want to just keep it toned down in the department and feel freer with people on your outside of the department list, or like be your full self on Twitter so you have a release? I'm saying this specifically for, I think, especially for undergrads, right? Like, you know, yeah, like y'all are taking 5 classes. I don't know how much time y'all have to like show up and like break down every barrier that exists. I'm really just trying to like point out things that might be happening, which many of you are aware of because you're already here at this talk with me, right? Like, but you have to like think about how you can feel your full self. That might be ways where you push into the department and make a space for yourself, or it might be finding like more outside community where you are making other spaces for yourself, right? Again, this one is sort of, I think the most, so I don't mean selfish here as a bad word, like your reaction to this one should probably be sort of selfish because like it's not ruining your mental health to make a like women of the math department club is not, I think, conducive to the overall goal of breaking norms, because now you can't break no more because you're tired, right? Like, so think about what's best for you, or like get a buddy to help you out. Me, like, I want to point out specifically, like, I was not like this in undergrad at all. Like, I was genuinely just trying to survive, right? Like, I was trying to go to class and not fail and like get through the racist professor's class and like just like make it out. So like maybe I'm making waves now or whatever, right? But like I was not doing that in undergrad. I did not do any of that stuff. I like grew into this part of me and I grew into it through community, right? So don't feel bad, right? Like you don't have to be quiet about stuff forever. You got to do stuff at your own pace. And also if you don't have a lot of support, it's very difficult, right? So break that norm by doing what's best for you. I almost came up with something conclusively here, and I realized I've reacted to things like this entirely differently across 12 years. So every reaction you think you might have, I've probably already done it. Norm number 5, possibly my favorite, snitches get stitches. I see like slightly embarrassed with Noelle face this time. But like, you know, the norm is we have to be quiet about mistreatment. I would like to point out Harvard professor in the news recently, right? That's the norm, not just in math, but we're in math situations here. You know, these are very fancy math people. We need them and their fanciness and their fancy math, because if they don't prove things about our abstract objects, how will we live? Like, how will we get through the day? Yeah, this, I think more so than other fields, I think it actually matters less in math if we just get rid of people, right? Like we're not, like if, especially like pure mathematicians, right? Like we're not helping anybody cure cancer. Like I love this. I'm like playing with my little math puzzles all day, right? Like I'm drawing some pictures, doing cute stuff. Like I'm really not saving the world with my math. I'm trying to like bring up some mathematicians to people to love math and feel more confident in themselves. Like that's my ministry mostly. I like research, but like if I was a trash person and my research ran away, like what physical effect on the world does that have, right? Like, I think that we're pretending like we're losing the greatest minds of mathematics, but we're not like setting anyone back, right? Like most of the time when we're in pure math in particular, this norm is trash in particular, because if they're trash to you, you're not the only person. Like you are, unless this is a brand spanking new person with a brand new degree at a first job, you may be the first, but you won't be the only person for long, right? Like, throw up a hand or like say me in the chat if you have experienced or heard of bad treatment from math professor ever, or you're in your area. Like, so this is not applicable to just, I'm seeing hands, right? Like this is regular. It's like it's not shocking to people who are here, right? But like this is regular. Like bad treatment is regular. It doesn't have to be like big things. Sometimes, like I had a professor in undergrad who used to say that he would tear up people's homework if you turned it in late. But he only ever did it when people of color turned their homework in late. Like he would tear it up at the front of class and he wouldn't hand it back to you and refuse to grade it. He would get rid of your work. And like I think I didn't recognize that for like how weird, like that's very weird, right? But there's like no one to talk to about it because everyone's assuming this is a thing that's okay, right? Like he's been doing it. People are letting him do it in the department. Like that's not a big thing, but it's weird, bad mistreatment, right? Like you are not the only person probably who's going through whatever it is, right? So like, oh, haha, we've got cartoonish level of villains masquerading as professors, right? Like people who feel like because they've got tenure and their job super secure and you can't get them, right? This norm, you need a lot of people if you're going to break it, right? Like depending on what the mistreatment is, sometimes it's like I had a friend in undergrad and a professor accused her of cheating, provided no evidence, and then said, I'm giving you a D for your final grade. And if you try to take me to the honor board, I'm going to win because, you know, I've been here for a super long time. And she came and told us and we didn't do anything about it because we were like, what are we going to do with this like tenured white dude, right? Like he's a full professor and like we're 20, right? Like, what are we going to do about it? Like, this is where I didn't have like all of these people, especially at the beginning of undergrad. Like this is where you need a lot of people to check in on what's happening. Not all of them. Sometimes, you know, too many cooks spoil the soup, right? But like you need your is this wild friend, number one, right? To ask, was I mistreated? They're gonna say yes, because you were. If you have an academic mentor of any kind in your department, off a campus, whatever, call them up and be like, here's what's happening. This is your secondary is this wild check. Because if someone who's been in academia is responding, this thing is wild, again, it's wild, it's happening, right? You need a friend, right? Because you need some support to like work through what happened. Like, I didn't even realize a bunch of the small stuff in undergrad was like actually big stuff until like years later, right? Like in therapy being like, that was trauma, huh? Right? Like, you need to talk about it with your friends who may also be your mental health support or your therapist, right? Well, sorry, your friends, not your therapist. Your friends may be a part of your mental health support network. That's what I mean. And then if you're going to tell on someone, you need someone to tell, right? Like you need a department or a university person that you can bring this up to, right? Like to say, like, is there something that could be done, right? So you need, and you actually need a university or department person, unless whatever it is so egregious that you could like leak it to the student paper, which I'm not saying you shouldn't do. I'm just saying I would totally do that now. So like you need to figure out, like, are you actively mistreated, and will telling someone help? What is helping? I didn't define it. Does it make you feel better? Great. Does it get them some consequences? Great. Does it stop this from happening sometimes? Great. Like help could mean anything. So break this norm. This is a sometimes, right? Like maybe you're not in a place where you could like, you know, like some of the people I'm mentioning from like the smaller stories, right? Like there was like no one to tell because they were at the top of the chain, right? Like, I don't know what the outcome would have been if I had said something, but I still, like, I don't know, like, that big grown me would say something now. Like, I don't know if it would be worth it, right? Like, again, like, I'm risk averse, but I also really struggle to be quiet. If you've ever been near me when someone said something rude to me and you like saw me inhale because I'm about to say something, I know these don't go together, like the risk averse plus that. So like, you need all of the people. You need to evaluate your like risk level you're willing to take on, the amount of risk there actually is. And then if you decide to do or not to do something, you need people support after. Okay, I know this is like vague, but there's just so many like telling. Sometimes you got to choose your battles. I am choosing them more now. I went through a couple of years where I picked every battle and I don't regret it. But right? Like, again, is this going to help or harm your survival? You got to ask yourself that question. So there's like some things here to think about. Like, can you talk? Is this a person you're in a position to talk to directly? Like, is it someone like lateral to you? Is there something that's actually reportable? Is it against an actual written rule? There's your key. If it's there, like I say, go ahead. Do you want to tell the internet? Because sometimes that's way better than anything else. Like if you go on Twitter and you're like, listen to what this person did to me, you're going to get so much support in such a short period of time. And it could just, you know, let you get relaxed enough to go to sleep, right? Maybe that's what you need. Can you snitch anonymously, right? Is that an option here? And then like write down, like, what are the worst and best case scenarios of this? I will do this a lot. Sometimes the best case scenario is really good. And the worst case scenario is just like slightly worse than where you are now, right? Like just take a look at what's happening and your team of people can help you to figure this out. Okay. So like, oh, right. Norm number 6, don't throw the vibes off. Checking on time. You have to, I feel like I'm repeating the same norm a lot with like conforming to department and being a mathematician, but like you must conform to whatever the vibes of the department are, right? Like we are quiet in this department and we do not speak loudly while doing math. We are very competitive and we all speak loudly while doing math and chewing our food aggressively while writing on the board in the main room, right? Like what's the vibe of your department, right? And like, do you naturally fit into it? Or are you just totally opposite in any way? Again, assuming people who are here, you are not quite fitting into the vibes of your department, right? This is trash because like, again, the institution's not changing, but people are, right? Like things we used to think are wrong. Needs are changing. And if we're not shifting with the times, like what is the point, right? Like if you think about yourself 5 years ago and you're embarrassed, like you're living life right. You know, like we should be changing. I'm pausing for an activity, even noticing that time is here. I actually want to do like a little word cloud of like vibes of your department. I'm going to pop a link into the, oh my God, the spinning wheel of death is on my screen. Okay, sorry, I got it. I've got the link now. I'm going to activate and share a link into the chat once I find it. Okay. And I'm going to share this new screen to tell you what I want to talk about. So I want you to click that and I'm going to go to so many windows up. Wow. Where is it? Oh, I think, are you seeing it now? Okay, so I popped some words in like, is your department communal, warm, supportive, elitist, sad, cold? This is totally anonymous. And I want people with the link I popped into the chat to just pop some words in about the vibes of your department. I just put some of these in here to give us like a starting point. But like small, large, big, any of those things are good to have here. I am hoping that people can actually, oh, I see things coming in, right? I want us to like look at, oh, white is getting very big, very fast. I want us to take a minute and like add as many words as you want in there. I love supportive in quotations, right? Like this is amazing. White is still real strong here. I'm hoping people are still typing. I'm just watching it change. Oh, I guess I could have clicked this present button. to make it real big. Uncommunicative, quiet, cis, tense, exclusive, tepid, separate, anti-Black, isolated. There's so many words popping up here and like almost none of them are good, right? Like people are still typing words in. But like the thing about this norm and why it's trash, if you look at the words the people are saying are the vibes of their department, these are not things we want to be. Right? Like I mean, amazing is good. I see that. Supportive is good. I might have written that. I might still be the only person, but like, I don't want to be elitist. I don't want to be male because I'm not, right? Like I am cis, but I wish my department was less cis, right? Like I don't want to be a part of whatever is happening here. But I am anything here that I'm contributing to, like I'm contributing to throwing the vibes of the department off, right? So like if you're in charge of the vibes, you should be trying to make them better. Like if you notice your department's isolating and you are like the adult, right? Like you're in charge of some stuff, you should be working on that. That's your job, right? If you are a person that's like does not have a lot of power in your department, your job is to notice. Right? And like your job is to notice and maybe tell someone what you're noticing. Because I know after a while of being in a place, you're probably like slipping into supporting the norms, right? And saying, hey, I'm just going back to my other screen real quick. Thank y'all for participating in that. Not desktop to Google Chrome. There we go. It's just that like the norms of the department are usually bad. The vibes often are bad, as we saw through the word cloud, right? Like the reason this thing is super trash is like, if you're a student, it's hard to change vibes of the department, right? Because like you're really passing through for 4 years. As a grad student, you may have some more time, right? Like 6 years is significantly more time than 4 years, right? To get something started. If you can even just change the vibes of the grad student by just being super supportive, right? Like do work with people, change the norms in your small group. Departments have a short memory. Grad students may never know that the grad students used to be divided if your department's small enough, right? Like you figure out if you can make changes. This thing, are you worried about seeming unpersonable? That's also a control tactic, right? That's like a respectability thing. Are you just getting sick of toning yourself down? Or is the thing you're doing like a survival tactic, like advanced code switching, because you just can't deal with anything else? You're not wrong, right? Like I sometimes again, you have to pick what's best for you based on like survival, right? But once you're in charge of things, once you are a professor, like you can, you know, make some survival choices, but like you are more obligated to be attempting to change the vibes for the better, right? Like that is now your obligation. They're not paying you for it. And your colleagues may like not, I don't mean to wave at my colleagues, I actually like my department a lot. But you it's now a thing, right? Like students are passing through, and if you're not helping to change the department, like what, you know, like what are you doing? um right? You can always start small if you are a student and just trying to make yourself like a little cute vibe bubble, right? Like ask someone to eat lunch with you. I literally still do this now when I'm trying to make friends. I'm like, hey, you're alone. Do you like snacks? Right? If I've ever made friends with you at a conference, it's because you were standing alone or you were Black and with people. I just like wander up and I'm like, how was your trip here? Do you like chocolate cake? Right? Like I just am talking to people about anything because again, you get to be people and not just mathematicians. Wear the clothes you actually want to wear, right? Like this is applying, I think, to a lot of the isms and the phobias, right? Like, are you non-binary and you are like, you know, like masking yourself by wearing like what you think people are reading you as, like you're trying to wear those appropriate clothes, like start sneaking some stuff in, right? Like do it real slow if you are comfortable, right? And if you like bright colors, but you don't want to be seen, right? Like start wearing a little pin to make yourself feel better. Just give yourself a little delight, right? Um, And this is my last norm. Math is a higher calling. Again, it feels like I'm repeating myself. People have to go because I talk too long, but like math doesn't have to be your whole life to enjoy what you do. Here is a picture. I literally just framed the photos from my thesis, posted them on Twitter because I liked them and they make me happy. I actually don't even care that they're math. I'm just like, look, I made this. um, that is, I don't even think I'm talking about breaking this norm. I just like, don't let them trick you into thinking that it is a higher calling and you must do this because for the good of humanity. Like, don't, I feel like that vibe occurs like you are a mathematician. You are good at this. You are only allowed to do this. It's not fun. You must do this, right? So here, I guess for discussion later, right? Like what norms do you see where you are? And I'm asking the inquiry questions. What do you notice? What do you wonder, right? Um, oh, like allies, enemies, and moderates, people who tell you that they're comfortable with norms and with moderate change, they're not your allies, they're enemies in disguise. I just want to remind you of that, where they're like, we'll change this little by little. They're not looking for change. Okay, they're lying to you. And also make trouble, right? Remember, what are your goals? What are your values? You don't have to do everything, right? Like you don't have to fix everything for all of your identities and all of the troubles and all of the vibes at once. Like you're allowed to pick something and work on it and support other people in the things that they're passionate about. But be aware, right? Like don't ignore other people's troubles because they don't apply directly to you. You should still be supporting them even if you're not leading the charge. And like, who do you talk to when you think it's time to make trouble? That's the question I need you to keep. Talk to them. Your is this wild friend, your trusted people, your list, right? Like keep it, ask them when you're figuring out if it's time. And I think we might, is this the end? Haha, human barriers. These are just disconnected thoughts. People who are comfortable with the norms in place will never hesitate to get in your way. It doesn't matter if they laugh and it doesn't matter if they're like, oh, I'll take this to the higher ups and they never get back to you. It's not a mistake. They're doing that on purpose, just to be clear, right? It's fighting the status quo is not easy. And a lot of your barriers will just be human. They won't be words written on paper. There'll be people getting in your way. So if you want to find me, I've got an email, it's my name. I've got a website, it's my name. I've got a Twitter, it's not my name. And I'm just pointing out, like, sometimes I'm on there talking trash about mathematicians, and sometimes I'm live tweeting bad shows that are on Netflix, right? It's a mixed bag. So if you do follow me on Twitter, I'm not tweeting about bad things at all times, because for survival, I can't. I think that's my last slide. So I just want to say thank y'all for listening and for the people who did stay, even though I talked over for a little bit. All right. I appreciate y'all. I appreciate the invitation and I hope that y'all did get something out of this.